We're going to show them that, we're going to fight.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump says he will appeal his felony conviction. Will the outcome hurt or help his bid for the White House? Hello, I'm Arnold Maidu, and this is The Heat. It wasn't exactly a surprise. Donald Trump vowed to appeal the conviction that made him the first former U.S. president to become a felon. He was found guilty on all 34 charges of falsifying documents to cover the traces of a hush payment to an adult film star back in 2016. On Friday in New York, there were demonstrations against Trump and also a show of support. Sally Partisan has the latest.
If they can do this to me, they can do this to anyone. That was the foreboding warning from Donald Trump addressing reporters and a small crowd of supporters on Friday. Here at Trump Tower, the former U.S. president promised to keep fighting after being found guilty of 34 felony counts.
Because I'm willing to do whatever I have to do to save our country and to save our Constitution. I don't mind.
The question many want to know, how will this verdict affect his chances of reclaiming the Oval Office? In polls leading up to the verdict, most voters said the outcome wouldn't change their minds. But that was before a convicted criminal was running for the White House.
I'm very happy because I don't feel anyone's above the law. And I think that this person has been paramount in dismantling our democracy up until this point.
If the people in the country don't see the judicial system as it is right now, don't think if they can do this to a president especially for what they've been going at the last 7 or 8 years on him, they need to wake up because they're next. I mean, that's what's going to happen.
Following Thursday's extraordinary verdict, support continues to pour in from Trump's Republican allies, pledging their continued allegiance to their party's presumptive nominee. They include House Speaker Mike Johnson, the top Republican on Capitol Hill, calling the trial a purely political exercise, not a legal one. Not just words, but money also flooding in. Trump's campaign says it's raised almost $35 million since the verdict. But President Joe Biden's campaign has also upped the ante, asking supporters for donations, warning that despite his conviction, Trump will be his rival at the polls.
The justice system should be respected, and we should never allow anyone to tear it down. It's as simple as that.
And in Trump's own words, the real verdict is going to be on Election Day, November 5th, by the people. Sally Patterson, CGTN, New York.
There is a lot to talk about. Let's bring in our panelists here in our studio. Joel Rubin is a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. From Roanoke in Virginia, John Fishwick Jr. is a trial lawyer and former U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Virginia. Art Estopinan is the president of the Estopinan Group. He joins us from Annapolis in Maryland. Thanks to all of you for being with us. John Fishwick, let me start with you. You are the legal man. So after relatively quick deliberations, the jury returned guilty verdict on all counts. And in response, Trump said afterwards, he called the process a sham and a political trial. But looking at the trial itself, what is your view of the process and the outcome?
Well, Anna, I think we knew it was going to be a guilty verdict when the jury's first questions were, let me hear the testimony of Mr. Pecker and Mr. Cohen as relates to the August of 2015 meeting between Cohen, Pecker, and the former president. Under the prosecution's theory, that's when they hatched the plan, the conspiracy to hush up folks who had bad things to say about the former president and to do it by illegal means. So when the jury asked to hear those transcripts, I thought it was a pretty good indication that that was going to be a good day for the prosecution. It turned out it was. So I think how the public will view this will be a lot to be, obviously, which side of the Trump spectrum you're on, but also how they'll view the job that Judge Merchan did. Was he fair or not? I think he picked a fair jury. He did that in a way that was fair. Let a lot of people who said they couldn't do it fairly off the jury when they just raised their hand. I think that was smart. Some of his rulings, though, I think are going to be questioned. But the jury instructions, it made it easier for the jury to to reach a felony decision, I think will be questioned. Some of the evidence that came in with Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, I think that will be questioned. So as relates to what the country thinks of Judge Merchan and the fairness of this trial, I think the jury's still out.
John, we now will get into the sentencing phase of this trial. That's scheduled to take place on July 11th. I mean, that could change, but at the moment it's July 11th. And violations of these particular laws empower the judge to pass a sentence of up to 4 years in prison, although most experts and analysts that we've been listening to over the past few hours tell us that that is highly unlikely because this is a president. He has not committed a crime before. This is also a Class E felony, which is the lowest in New York. What do you think the sentence will be?
So, Anna, that's a great question. I think the prosecution is definitely going to ask for prison time. They're going to say, hey, look, Trump has thumbed its nose at the legal process. He's badmouthed the judge and the prosecutor throughout this process. He's violated the gag order 10 times. He's shown no remorse. We've got to give him prison time. That's what the prosecution will say. Trump legal team will say, hey, look, he's 78 years old. He had the most important job in this country by way of public service, President of the United States, no criminal record. When you compare him to others, nobody in his position has gotten prison time in comparable cases. I think it's highly unlikely the judge gives him prison time. I think he'll fuss at him. I think he'll maybe fine him, put him under some sort of probation, but even that's hard while he's running for president of the United States. And whatever sentence the judge imposes, it will be what's called stayed, which means it won't be put in place until all the appeals have run. So there's no way former President Trump will be incarcerated this year.
Art Estopinan, what is your view on what took place in that New York courtroom and the outcome yesterday?
I just think, Anand, that it's a very sad day for America. The reality is, when we last spoke in your program, in my opinion, there's no crime, there's no victim, and I think that the American people are seeing two sets of justices for Republicans and for Democrats. We see that Hillary Clinton, she whitewashed her server that was illegal, and there she is, free and no charges against her. Yeah. And now we see that President Biden, by his own Department of Justice, says that he's too senile, too old to be charged with any of the violations regarding the secret documents that he has, the classified documents that he has in his home when he was a senator and vice president. So I think that the American people are seeing this, and they're like, what is going on? Mm-hmm. Why this lack of justice for Democrats, and yet they're throwing the book at Trump when there's no victim, no crime, and I think people are very upset.
Yeah, Art, you say the American people are seeing this. Well, there was a poll conducted right after the verdicts were announced, sometimes called a flash poll because it's done so quickly, and that showed that 50% of Americans agree with the jury. That's 50%. Here is one view. Let's listen.
We want justice to be served, okay? That's bottom line. And if you broke the law, which they're saying in the state of New York, we want justice to be served.
And President Biden also made the point that no one is above the law.
That's really rich of him to say, when his son is walking around and there are all these allegations that he didn't register as a foreign agent when he represented Russia and Ukraine and Chinese companies, and he had firearms that were not registered, and I mean, I'm just expressing what I believe, and what I think at least half of the country, or not more, believe that no one is above the law. That includes the Bidens. How about all these millions of dollars that foreign nationals have been sending to the Biden family, including his granddaughter, that was discovered by the House Republicans? Nothing has happened to them. And that's why people are very upset, because nothing seems to stick to the Democrats, but yet they're trying to prevent President Trump from running as the opposition nominee to the presidency as a Republican, and because in the polls he's winning, he's beating President Biden in all of these swing states polling. So
Okay.
they're trying to. I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah.
That they're trying to incarcerate him because they cannot beat him in the polls.
Right. Joel, good to have you in the studio. Shortly after these verdicts were announced, President Trump, former President Trump, I should say, addressed the media. This is what he had to say. Let's listen to him.
I really think that this is an event, what took place yesterday with this judge. Look, we have conflicted, but he's a crooked judge, and you'll understand that. And I say that knowing that it's very dangerous for me to say that, and I don't mind, because I'm willing to do whatever I have to do to save our country and to save our Constitution.
So, Joel, it would appear that the Trump strategy is not just to reject the outcome of the trial, but also to attack the process, the legal system.
Sure, Anand, because this is a reckless man who wants to undermine American democracy, and that's why he is a convicted criminal. One thing we didn't hear over the last 10 minutes or so is any denial of the facts of the case, which is that he engaged in criminal activity to cover up information that would have harmed his ability to win in 2016, and then falsified business records and lied to the public. There is a victim. It's called the American people. Yeah. He lied to the public on those business records, and there were weeks of testimony from his confidants, testimony from people who worked with him, Hope Hicks, Michael Cohen, testimony in the form of documentation. Yeah. He is a convicted criminal because the rule of law worked in this country. No one is above the law, and no matter what kind of complaints and criticisms, political arguments that Donald Trump wants to make, he can't get around that fact, and he'll have to appeal this result and try to prove otherwise. But he, so far, is 0 for 34.
John Fishwick, former President Trump has been questioning the integrity of the process, the credibility of the court, but I want to go back to a case in 2016, because it has come up in many discussions, and that is the campaign involving Hillary Clinton, who of course lost to Trump in that election. Clinton's campaign paid for the so-called Steele dossier and listed the payment as legal fees. It wasn't. It was opposition research, and the Federal Election Commission investigated and fined her campaign as well as the Democratic National Committee just over $100,000. What's the difference here? Why was she not charged? Why with the kinds of felonies that Donald Trump faced?
Yeah, I think the former President Trump has good arguments as relates to that. I mean, he can say his conduct is really not as bad as what Hillary Clinton did, or there's similar conduct, and she wasn't prosecuted. And the Southern District of New York chose not to prosecute Trump over these allegations. They investigated, they charged Michael Cohen, but they didn't charge Trump. So I think he's got a legitimate beef there. But these processes will work out. I mean, one thing about the rule of law, I think former President Trump's got good appeal issues, and they'll sort their way through the legal system. It's going to take a while. But as relates to the Bidens, I mean, Hunter Biden is going to trial on Monday, facing 3 felony charges in Delaware. So, yes, there are, the legal system's not perfect, and there can be inequities. But there is a process, and I've got confidence in it. In other words, if former President Trump was wrongly convicted, I think the appeal process will come through for him, and he's got a number of good appeal points. As relates to Hillary Clinton, maybe she should have been charged then. That's a real beef. But at this point, that doesn't really enable him to have his charges dropped. It's a good beef he can raise, but I don't think it's really material to his appeal.
Right, John, one other legal point, a legal question, that is the kind of, let's call it creative bookkeeping that Trump was accused of took place in 2016. It was in the run-up to the election in 2016. Why did these charges only come 8 years later?
Well, I mean, I think the former president has a good beef here. These were long ago paperwork charges. In fact, the misdemeanor is time barred. They couldn't bring the misdemeanor charge. They could only bring felony charges. Southern District of New York passed on this. Previous prosecutor in the Manhattan's office passed on it. DA Bragg brought it. You know, yay or nay on that. It's a weak case. It's certainly viewed as the weakest case against the former president. I don't think there's any question about that. But nonetheless, he has been found guilty. He says it's on enemy territory. It obviously is. It's in Manhattan. It's a 90-10 Biden place. But nonetheless, that's where he is. That's what's happened. It is a weak case, but he was found guilty. He'll have to sort it out on appeal. I think he can have success. I don't think he's going to prison. but nonetheless, that's where we are.
Joel, you want to respond to that?
You know, first of all, Donald Trump is from New York, so the idea that his enemy territory is a farce. The fact that people chose to convict him of crimes that were proven in court doesn't mean that he had a bad jury against him. There's reports that some of these people are on Truth Social and actually follow him. So that's just what we call gaslighting. But I think there's another point here which is crucial. He falsified business records. And in the state of New York, that is a crime. And that is what he was charged with. And it took about 2 years to get through the process. We found out about this, we meaning the collective public, about 6 years ago when Michael Cohen began to talk publicly. This was not an immediate turnaround kind of case. It took a while to wind through the courts. And in the state of New York, falsifying business records, turns out, is a felony. And that's what he did. And that's why he was convicted.
Why do you think Hillary Clinton was not charged?
I honestly do not know, but I'll tell you one thing. She didn't falsify business records. And I'll tell you another thing. And here, I'll make a political argument. Now I'll make a little political argument here, because I've been hearing a lot of political arguments. I hear a lot of complaining. Hunter Biden, Hillary Clinton. Prove it. Bring him to court. Do it. Go ahead. This was brought to court. Wait. Let me finish, please.
I'll get to you, Art.
This was brought to court because this was a provable case. There are 3 other good cases to go after, like stealing classified secrets, leading an insurrection. There's one more I can't remember off the top of my head. There's so many criminal cases pending against this man. Now, this is the first, and this was provable. And remember, in this country, we have a history of going after, for example, mob bosses, not because about the murders they committed, but for cheating on their taxes. So Donald Trump, he got his day in court, and he lost.
Okay, Art, go ahead. You want to say something?
Yeah, I would like to know what documents did he falsify, sir?
It's entire in the docket in the court. I was not, nor were you, sitting in the court. I have not read every single document, but I will tell you one thing. I will tell you one thing, that the falsified payments from, wait, you asked me a question. The falsified payments from Michael Cohen that he then publicly stated, that the reimbursement.
That's what he said.
Look, all I'm going to say is that the jury found that your argument was wrong. The jury found that your argument was wrong.
Not true.
Just a moment.
The jury found you to be wrong.
There are no falsified documents. That is a lie.
Falsified use of documents.
The contract was between Cohen and Stormy Daniels.
You're arguing a case that was already proven. Maybe you should go sign up to be his attorney on the appeals.
I'm not an attorney. I'm not an attorney.
Clearly.
I'm just an American who's observing this and is very upset at the injustice.
You're very upset that your candidate lost in court in a fair process.
Crucifixion. So May the 30th was a crucifixion, but November the 5th is going to be his resurrection.
Well, we can talk about that.
I want to get back to the. I want to get back to some of the legal questions. John, we were talking earlier on about the appeal process. Could this case go all the way up to the United States Supreme Court?
I think that's possible, Anand. I mean, here's how it'll work. After he gets sentenced on July 11th, his legal team will have 30 days to what's called file the notice of appeal, and then lawyers do what's called briefing. That's kind of a misnomer. Those are long documents where they say the reasons why they should get a new trial or the case should be thrown out, and then the prosecution responds. There's 2 appeal courts in New York. It'll take years to have the appeals heard by those 2 appeals courts. But after that appeal has run the courts, it's possible it could go to the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, though, has to be careful. It has to be a case of kind of constitutional importance or where there's a split between the circuits. They don't often take state criminal cases. It's possible. I think more likely it will be decided by the New York Appellate Court.
Can either of those appellate courts in New York State prevent it going to the U.S. Supreme Court?
No, they can't prevent it. In other words, if the Trump legal team gets to the final appeals court in New York, the second appeals court, and let's say they lose, they have an absolute right to put what's called petition the United States Supreme Court to take the case. It's just uphill. They can only take so many cases. Obviously, presidential immunity is a huge case. They took that case. Would they take kind of a run-of-the-mill criminal case? Maybe unfairness, but not really constitutional questions. I think unlikely.
Okay, and just one more point on the appeal, John, and that is, I mean, we heard from the defense that one of the prosecution's key witnesses, Michael Cohen, lied, effectively perjuring himself, they say, on the stand. Is that going to be central to their appeal?
It's harder to make it a big point on the appeal. That was really a jury question. Was he lying or not? I thought they did a good job with the cross-examination, but not a good enough for the jury. On the appeal, I think it'll be more on the legal points. It'll be on how the jury was able to decide that it was a felony. It'll be on some of the evidence that the judge let in as relates to Stormy Daniels and Kira McDougal. They can call Michael Cohen a liar on appeal, but it really won't help with the appeals court. Those will be more legal arguments where they'll be saying, hey, look, throw the whole case out. The judge made some real mistakes legally.
Joel, you know, we posed a legal, political question rather at the beginning of the show. Is this going to help or hurt Trump's campaign for the White House? We have a little bit of evidence right now. The Financial Times had a front page story today saying that he raised $34 million in the hours after these verdicts were handed down. What do you make of that? It seems that the certain groups are rallying around the president.
Well, he's going to need that money for his appeals process first. Yeah. I do think that this helps him with his base. It clearly motivates him. It makes him want to give him more money. It doesn't expand his voter base, and that's ultimately what matters when it comes to Election Day. You know, will Americans be interested in voting for a convicted criminal and giving him the nuclear codes and saying, sure, we can have a convicted criminal in the White House deciding what our economic policy will be, what our tax policy will be. We can have someone who the courts don't trust and the American people doesn't trust to make decisions about life or death for our country. We've already seen how that works out for the country with COVID, the pandemic, and then the insurrection. But I do think that polling will get narrower on the question of who in November 5th is going to be the victor. But one argument Trump will clearly make is he wants to be in the White House to self-pardon and get out of jail.
Estopinan, what is your view on that? I mean, on the fact that he did raise quite a bit of money in the aftermath of the verdicts being handed down. I mean, do you think he will get hurt in the long term by this, or will it help him?
I think it will help him, Anand, because he's up to $38 million now. Again, the American people see that this is a charade. They see that this is a political persecution, nothing to do with the U.S. Legal system. And the fact of the matter is that the country is falling apart. We see it in the border with the 10 million illegal immigrants, and the FBI director has said, get ready, because the United States will be suffering a terrorist attack. We see it with the crime that is going on in all of the major cities and the exodus of the residents of San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York City, going into Florida and Texas, where Republican states that protect their people. The American people are very, very concerned. Inflation, high gas prices, high food prices, high rent prices, high insurance prices. It's a disaster. And President Biden and his administration are taking this country in the wrong path. We see it in the bodegas with the African American and Latino community in New York and in the Bronx. They're all supporting, I stand with Trump, they're saying. And I think people want to change. And that change is with the movement of MAGA and President Trump.
John, is there anything in the United States Constitution that could prevent Trump from continuing to run for president now that he is a convicted felon?
No, Anand, nothing that's happened this past week affects anything in his presidential campaign. He can run for president as a convicted felon. He can be the president as convicted felon. He can, in fact, vote in this election because under Florida law, they look to New York law. And if he hasn't been imprisoned in New York, you can vote. So it doesn't affect him in any way. He cannot pardon himself if he wins because this is a state conviction. He would not be able to pardon himself.
Joel, of course.
That'll be for the other cases.
Joe, there is, of course, the White House, and then there is the campaign, the Biden campaign. They're two separate entities. The White House has been very careful about this in making statements about what happened, but the Biden campaign did release a statement, and I'm going to read you part of that, and that statement says, quoting here, America just witnessed a confused, desperate, and defeated Donald Trump ramble about his own personal grievances and lie about the American justice system, leaving anyone watching this with one obvious conclusion: this man cannot be president of the United States. Is that a smart move, even by the campaign? Because, I mean, if it weaponizes the trial and the outcome against Donald Trump, doesn't it feed into suspicions, which we're hearing from Trump and his supporters, even now, that this is a political hit job?
Yeah, this is a very real question, and there's a big debate right now in the Democratic Party about what to do, but I come down on the side of if you don't say anything, the other side will. So as we hear in this discussion right now, there will not be any shyness amongst Trump's defenders, and they are trying to frame the decision in a manner that benefits their candidate in the public eye. There is no way that Joe Biden's people, his team, can be or should be silent about this. Look, we have a man who was just convicted of a crime that is not only the most seedy and sordid type of crime, but was also done to benefit his ability to become the president of the United States, a corruption of democracy at the highest level. And that must be communicated time and again, that this is what you get in candidate Trump. This is what's on the ballot in 2024. This is the kind of ethical core, or lack thereof, that you would put in the White House if you vote for him. If that case is not made, then the other side's argument will win, and that is harming the ability of the American people to truly decide what they want in the White House.
Art, Joel raises some interesting questions there, or points out to us that, you know, part of the strategy is going to be this is what you get if you are a supporter of Donald Trump, or even if you vote for him.
And that's what people want. People want Trump back because when he was president, if you remember the low unemployment amongst all different types of Americans, Latinos, African Americans, women, young people in particular, are very upset with President Biden because everything is so expensive. Inflation has just taken over their whole lives. They have to stay living with their parents in the basement because they cannot afford to buy a home, certainly, or for rent or food. So the majority of Americans are very upset. The Democrat elites are very happy with President Biden because if you have gold, if you have cryptocurrency, if you have bonds, if you have stocks, the stock market is doing very well. But that's only for the elite. So this country is seeing a realignment of the working class and middle class Americans that are gravitating towards President Trump because he identifies with them. And that's an interesting perspective. And I know historians are going to be studying that realignment, but that's the reality that is going on at this time. Working class Americans are feeling the pain at this time.
And that is where we are going to have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.